Hello and welcome to episode 417 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and today we will talk about Borussia Dortmund's latest signing, Nico Schlotterbeck. As promised, I'm joined by a man whose Twitter handle is @BundesPL, yet mostly tweets about Serie A these days. Abel Meszaros. Hello Abel, it's great to have you on the show. I'm very keen to hear more depth and detail about Nico Schlotterbeck, and I'm even more excited to just talk to you because it's been a while.
I know, it's been a long time, my friend. Yeah, and it's been a long time for the Yellowwallpod as me. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't really get to cover as much Dortmund as I was doing in the previous 4 or 5 years due to kind of just the way things have happened as far as some of my work, which now focuses more on the Italian football side of things, but I still actually watch a lot of it. Just not necessarily like, and it's kind of weird. I don't really do it live, so then I also don't feel like there's much of a platform for me. And yeah, but I do actually follow the Bundesliga for like some of the other work I do as far as some scouting and things like that. So in that sense, obviously it's good, but and Dortmund is obviously still a team that I'm fairly close to from an emotional standpoint. Although I think you'll probably agree with me that this season has maybe not helped that.
No. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about that. But yeah, sometimes it's also just nice to not deal with all the professional stuff and just, follow as a fan. I personally know that too. So yeah, let's get into it. Obviously, Schlotterbeck did sign the 5-year deal coming from Freiburg. And yeah, he's already a German international, only 22 years old. And yeah, I think every Dortmund fan is very excited about the addition just because it's another defender, and Dortmund's defending has not been great recently, even though obviously defending already starts in possession if you accurate, and is a whole team experience, which Dortmund right now are not doing extremely well. Nevertheless, I think it's safe to say that he will be the long-term replacement for Mats Hummels, since he is left-footed and will play in that position next to Niklas Süle a lot, probably. But yeah, but I don't know where you want to start, so I'm just gonna hand you over the show. And I don't know if you want to be chronological or just talk about his player profile first.
Yeah, I mean, I think like obviously the deal made all kinds of sense for Dortmund because I mean, by probably the early parts of this year, there were I mean, all pretty much the whole world was in. I actually want to ask you before we get like started on that, like, what did you feel about Sebastian Kehl's involvement and some of his like Freiburg ties? If that you think like kind of gave Dortmund the edge, or do you feel it was like basically he, Nico, basically, wanted to stay in Germany, and I didn't really think like Bayern made a ton of sense given that they shelled out all this money for center backs and Upamecano and Hernandez, and then this is before.
Yeah, I think he said today that he wanted to stay in Germany, and yeah. I don't know how much Kehl was involved. I think the reports are that he's been more involved than Sorg, and he, I think, talked himself about it in the club's press release, that he is obviously himself from Freiburg and is hoping that Schlotterbeck will take a similar path as he did to become I don't know if he said become an icon, but basically that's what Kehl did. So if you say take a similar path, then I think you can imply that. I think it's exciting to have a new sporting director, even though Michael Zorc is a club legend, obviously, and will be he will have his farewell along with Marcel Schmelzer this Saturday against Hertha Berlin. But yeah, Sebastian Kehl obviously also a club legend in his own sense, and I'm excited because so far the transfers that he's made along with Zorg, are promising. I mean, I personally cannot complain about Süle, and I also cannot complain about Schlotterbeck. I still have a question mark behind Adeyemi just because he's very much an unknown entity. But as we record today, he was also spotted in Dortmund and is, doing his medical, and probably later in the day will be announced. But yeah, back to Schlotterbeck and Sebastian Kehl. I think it's promising because it's a new era starting at Dortmund, and so you need to, I think, refresh a lot of positions, and I think the back line is probably a very high priority. I think the number 6 position is maybe even higher. But with probably Akanji leaving, Zagadou leaving, and so this is a really promising start. I'm really excited, and I can't wait to hear you talk more about him. Obviously, I've watched a lot of Schlotterbeck minutes in recent weeks just because I wanted to get a better image of him. But nevertheless, Abel, should we start at his youth days, or where do you want to start?
Yeah, like basically just his background, right? Like, so he comes from sort of the Stuttgart area, and his uncle Niels is basically was a teammate of Jürgen Klinsmann at Kickers, and a lot of his football education is related to Stuttgarter Kickers, and his uncle still has a lot of these kind of football camps, and I think both Nico and Kevin, his brother, are frequent participants. So they're very much sort of got ties to Stuttgart and that region. And he basically played in the Kickers youth setup until at the under 15 level. He following the 15 level, he was not selected to the U16s, and that represented a massive break. So this is around 2014, and basically there were stories that he wanted to quit. There were stories that, that it wasn't necessarily, I think, the footballing part of it, although I think that was it, but certainly the personality and just attitude and these kind of things. I mean, even Nico talked about this in sort of some of the interviews that I've seen with him, where he wasn't necessarily like I don't know how much of sort of the outside of the football pitch training there is in terms of like weight room and these kind of dedications, and like keep in mind 14, 15-year-olds. So that's certainly from like my days of being there. Like it's a difficult time, I think, in general. So but yeah, nevertheless, like it didn't work out for him at Kickers, and then he basically went to Haaland for about a year to play there, and it was Lukas Kwasniok, who now is probably one of the best side Bundesliga coaches, who kind of took a chance on him at KSC in Karlsruhe, and then it's I think you notice some of the commitments to him. I think Kwasniok has mentioned that he would travel like the way from Stuttgart to Karlsruhe, which is probably over an hour, maybe more, to training. So you certainly see that kind of attitude shift, and I think Schlotterbeck himself has mentioned this in some of the interviews, like ones I've seen at Union, where he has started to take this approach. So and then it was that was 2015 to 17, so 2 years there, and then this is this is the KSC, which are very, very famous for their youth setup, and they had Tim Walter there as well. So this is kind of a big time for them. And I mean, Schlotterbeck has credited Lukas Kwasniok for basically kind of saving his career because he wanted to quit. And then he moved on to Freiburg's 19s there, and then obviously that's another one where I mean Dortmund are all too familiar with young talented defenders coming from there. Although now Matthias Ginter has now returned to Freiburg, but I mean even some of the other ones, it's kind of where Dortmund like to buy players from, of course, and one of the better academies. And he would go on loan to Union Berlin, which is actually like where his brother went there in the previous season. So Kevin went there in the Aufstieg season, in the season where Union were promoted. And yeah, and then Nico kind of followed that path of getting some playing time at Union, and I think that's kind of where I noticed him. So like sort of my my sort of I don't know if love affair, but at least like certain him was it was like one of the very early Union games where he got a chance. I mean, I think he went in the winter, so it would have been like a 2020 January or something like that. And what I noticed him, and I think this is what makes him very, very unique, is that here's a guy who can do a lot of the defensive stuff, particularly like in the air duels, but the sort of Spieleröffnung, right? Like the sort of build up play and kind of just finding solutions and not being afraid and doing it with the left foot, right? So that's I think like those kind of qualities, which if you're a 21, 22-year-old young left-footed center back who can play in a back four, play in a back three, not afraid to dribble, really, really resistant to pressure, wins like crazy amount of aerial duels. In general, he's about like 68-70% of duels won. Really, really good at the sort of defending forward and the front foot defending. Can play in the pressing system. Can basically be left alone with someone like Erling Haaland. So there's not too many of those in the world. I would probably say there's probably like 2 or 3 of those kind of guys. And in general, like the center back position is really, really, really hard to evaluate in a lot of ways. But when you see someone like him, and then I think obviously this season it was very, very evident. I probably as soon as Freiburg got after that start that he was on for greater things.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because pressing resistance is obviously very important, and build-up play in general. I feel like I don't have it in front of me, but I feel like there were a lot of goals that were caused by Dortmund defenders making very weird decisions in build-up play. I think the most recent one is Zagadou against Bayern, but there are countless examples, be it Zagadou, Akanji. I think even Hummels had a couple of weird ones. Emre Can, when he played centre-back, most definitely played the ball directly into the opponent's feet. So I'm hoping, obviously, Nico Schlotterbeck and every other center back in the world will make mistakes. It's not like he's going to be flawless. But when we talk about how he's going to fit into Dortmund's system and how he's going to improve, do you think this is a piece of individual quality that will help him improve Dortmund instantly, let's say?
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. Like, just because I mean, Dortmund have played Hummels as the left-sided center back a lot of the times, right? And I mean, especially, I mean, I would say even since he's come back from Bayern, I mean, he was never really the fastest, and always kind of made up for it with the intelligence and positioning. But Schlotterbeck can. I mean, you saw. I think probably the best example is the Germany games that he's played. Where you're, Hansi Flick's Germany, you're playing at the halfway line all the time, and he's very comfortable with that. I would actually say that he's not like you mentioned the weaknesses of like the kind of lackadaisical passing, and he has the kind of tendencies to kind of take his eye off the ball or take a few moments too long, and will like sometimes give the ball away. But I think he actually has more trouble sometimes in defending in the box in terms of losing the man, or like not really like covering the blind side. I mean, there's a couple examples against Bayern, Wolfsburg, where he had some issues, but where I think he will be an instant improvement is that he has the sort of speed, or like the first step, I would say, which I think Hummels doesn't have anymore. I mean, Zagadou kind of when he was young, when he was kind of he's still very young, but when he was like 2018, Zagadou would have those, and just he hasn't, he's not really in rhythm. I think just with the injuries. But yeah. So, and that's the strength. I think Schlotterbeck's strength is important because he's spent a lot of time. I mean, as any of you have followed his sort of social media stuff, I mean, he will tell you, and every time he celebrates, he will let you know that he spent a lot of time in the weight room, right? But what matters, I think that will be something that will make it so. And I think that's actually kind of an underrated part of having Zula there as well, because you basically now have two of these center backs who I would say are like supremely comfortable in terms of dribbling forward and taking those areas that the press concedes you, because basically like every team usually just tries to pick sort of pick on one defender and then kind of guide the press that way. So if you're cutting the field in half, and then I think now it's actually going to be much harder for teams to press Dortmund in that way, because I mean you've seen Zula. I think the Kühlschrank dribbling is I think the sort of the refrigerator who gets moving is what a lot of people call it. But he's very hard to separate from the ball, and I think that will be really important. I think Akanji has gotten better at that, but still isn't really all that great at it. And yeah, with Schlotterbeck, I think that's probably one of his best qualities. And it's not only just that, but it's like taking the dribble and then opening sort of the play and finding those kind of chip passes, finding it low behind the opposition lines. These kind of things are really unique, I think, in that
Yeah,
profile.
I don't know if you watched the Germany game against Israel, but that was a game where Israel was very passive and he dribbled forward a lot. He like you would, if you didn't know who this player was, you could almost say he's maybe number 6.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think like part of the Dortmund's efforts of like not signing the sixes, I think, are mitigated by having these kind of.
Well, I'm hoping he still will sign Kiel or Zorc or whoever will still sign a number 6.
Yeah, I mean, I think they still might. It's just the problem is that there's not too many of those kind of sixes around. Like I guess Grilic would be someone that has been talked about a lot. But even in the Bundesliga, there's really not too many of these sixes. And I think particularly for what Rose and his staff would want, it'd be probably someone who could also play third center back, right? Which is not what, like, for example, Dahoud's not really that. I think Witzel was never really that. I guess you don't really want them to be that in charge.
Yeah, but he's until he gets replaced, he's, I think, the designated number 6 / center back.
Yeah, no, I think it makes sense to have those kind of versatile players, right? And I mean now I think in general, like the way I kind of think about Dortmund's recruitment is, or at least like the plans going forward for Rose, if the Ben Sebaini signing comes over the line, or some of the ones like Christensen, is that it becomes very Red Bull like, right, in terms of the playing style, right? And I think in that way Zule and Schlotterbeck both fit that profile of, you have these kind of very aggressive defenders who are also good on the ball but are very comfortable playing out of the back, and then you also have super aggressive fullbacks, right, who are not necessarily the guys who progress the ball. They're usually the ones who will either like regain it via counter pressing, or they can be athletic and then just be kind of with players. And then Benzabaini is obviously someone who you can play as a left-sided center back in a 3. I mean that's my thinking, and I think you mentioned Adeyemi in the beginning. Like he would obviously be really suited to this style of maybe playing a diamond, and then it's with him and Malen, or then Royce as a 10. I think that's something that I'm thinking about, without having any inside knowledge on this, but that would be something that which would give Dortmund some sort of identity, in the post Haaland years, I guess.
Yeah, identity is a nice word, because I feel like Dortmund this season lacked it severely, if I'm honest. And yeah, you had glimpses of what Rose may want to play, but I feel like throughout the year he was just busy making up for injured players rather than developing anything really where you can say, okay, this is clearly his handwriting just never really shone through. So yeah, I think the build-up, obviously, in the modern center-back, and especially when you're a Borussia Dortmund center-back, is a very big aspect. But it's obviously, for a defender, not yet the most important one, even though, as I said before, defending starts with possession, because if you have poor giveaways, that will make it harder for you to defend the ball. But that being said, I've also been very impressed in his 1v1 skills when it comes to tackling and his positional play, because if you look at him, even though he's relatively tall, he's not an absolute unit like Niklas Süle. Nevertheless, I think he's very intelligent in regaining possession and regaining it in a way that the ball does not land, 6-7 meters away and easily snuffed or picked up by the opponent again. So, Abel, what are you willing to highlight in his defending? Because you already said that he has weaknesses when it comes to blindside defending, etc. But what are the positives, maybe?
Yeah, no, I mean, but it's like stuff like, I think Streich was saying this earlier, that, like, especially recently, like, there's been, I mean, the Union match this weekend, there's a couple where, like, Geraldo Becker got in behind him, or even like Embolo at Gladbach. But it's like one of those kind of things where, like, that will happen to pretty much anybody who defends high, and also, like, might not have, like a Neuer on the back line, or that will, maybe limit those kind of mistakes. But yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of strength, because in general, like, his positioning is quite good when it becomes active, right? It's defending forward, right? Which is what you basically want from any center back who plays on a dominant team. And he will have, like, these kind of things where, like, I think is the cup game against Osnabrück, he had one where it was in the extra time, and he started, like, jumping out from a counter, and basically like a 3-on-3, and he just jumps out and wants to tackle and then misses it. But that's very, very rare. Like, that will be maybe like once a season or something, or twice a season. He's a very sure-footed tackler. He really, like, has good technique, and I would think, and drives forward well, and just I think where he's really improved is again, like, the sort of like the frame, as you mentioned, isn't really like, it doesn't look that impressive, but he he is, like, taller and bigger than you would think, I think, and probably plays bigger than his size, I think, is the way I would
I mean, he's 1 meter 90 or so, 91 or so. So he's pretty tall.
But doesn't, like, I mean, it doesn't necessarily, like, look like these kind of,
I know it's always different when you see these guys in person, to be honest.
Bastoni, I think is somewhat a similar defender, but I think, like, Bastoni looks much more lankier, whereas Nico looks much more kind of sturdy and but not, like, he's not, like, somewhat awkward looking. Like, I think he's filled out sort of his frame well, and does these kind of things well. So yeah, and then just to tackle success, like, those kind of things as well, where you have yeah, I mean, I think, like, there's a good sort of tweet, and it's like, I think it's Marcus Brink who has tweeted it, where it's like, he's basically like, he's really the only he's basically the only center back to be in the 90th percentage in progressive passing, like aerial duels, and then and I think there's a third category, which I'll find in a second. But yeah, so it's not too many of those guys. So that's why I meant that he's unique. So and I think, like, the mistakes, like, from what I understand, I mean, there's I think Shoyunsu was a good example for this, right? Where, like, he also made a lot of mistakes, but I think maybe teams don't necessarily care so much about them if you have so many other extra qualities. And this is what I meant by, like, the skill set that he has in terms of, opening the play, like creating shots for others, driving forward, like being able to play through the lines, pass through the lines, have the intelligence. And then he actually is like a massive threat on set pieces and scores goals, right? To the point where, like, Freiburg are regularly beating teams with him being the one found on set pieces.
Yeah,
So
Lina is also a very big part of that, to be honest.
yeah. So it's but yeah, I mean, you saw them against Gladbach, for example, where it was like the game was over after like 20 minutes because they just did the set pieces. But and then like I think you saw I think in both of the Dortmund games, or certainly the first one where he just completely erased Haaland, and there's really not too many. And then this was like in the earlier parts of the season, right, when Haaland was completely healthy, and so it just like I think that those are the things I think that people in recruitment look at more, and they're and I think like some of the mistakes, which I think Hansi Flick talked about this as well, could be concentration, and certainly like Streich mentioned I think something, but he was kind of, as Streich is like, he was very sort of complimentary, is that like it's sort of natural that some guy who just signed his big move, and although like obviously Freiburg have a ton to play for in terms of the Pokal and then getting into the Champions League, but it's kind of natural that you would maybe like switch off, right? Like I think it's what it's a kind of a human nature thing, right? People who've just achieved something fairly big, and coming from where he was, like I think it's safe to say like 2 years ago, or like certainly 2.5 years ago, nobody knew who he was, right? Like it wasn't even really a Bundesliga player.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I also think that it was a very good idea to announce it. What was it, a week or so ago? Just so that Freiburg could then sign Ginter and make that official, but also just so everybody knows what the deal is going into very important games. Now, unfortunately, Freiburg did lose that game to Union Berlin, which was, I don't know if it was a free game or not, because 4-1 maybe not representative of that game.
I would say, yeah, from what I saw of it.
But yeah, Schlotterbeck also had a mistake in that game too, where he tried to, I think take a long ball and like.
Yeah, it was like a weaker kind of header, right? And then it kind of came back, and then they just immediately ran Geraldo Becker.
Yeah.
But Geraldo Becker is also one of the fastest guys in the league. So I mean, yeah, like it's not like he. I mean that's he is, I would say, above average in terms of athleticism and speed, but it's not like he's not. But who is like other than like maybe peak Virgil van Dijk, or Upamecano or Kanate, or some of these guys who will like catch up to someone and just erase those kind of mistakes. So, but yeah, I mean, you don't, I like not to, but those guys don't play at Freiburg, right? Like that's.
All right. So obviously this is going to be a bit of a loaded question now, but Dortmund did not have the success they really thought they would have in Matthias Ginter. Do you think that there is a chance that Schlotterbeck will not meet the expectations of Borussia Dortmund, their fans, etc.? Or do you think this is a very easy money in terms of a transfer that will hit?
No, I think it's a very obvious, and I think it's a very good transfer. Like I think it's like I don't think it has too much in common with Ginter, because I always thought Ginter is like he's more closer to the Emre Can kind of player, right? Where like plug him in. Like I think, I mean, in the Tuchel season, I remember him playing a lot of right back. And
yeah, he was good as right back because he
yeah,
was good at the cutbacks.
Yeah, and I always think that Ginter's like biggest quality is usually just kind of being versatile and like being a good guy, but like he's got a very shy personality. Like he wasn't much of a leader, right? Like I mean, a lot of the teams certainly that played against Gladbach, or even Dortmund, we were very much like just catering or tilting their pressing towards him. So he was always somewhat of a liability, I would say, and wasn't like a sharp passer, right? And I think that's where Schlotterbeck is exceptional. He's an absolutely world class progressor, passer, guy who's on the ball. So and I think it's not like Ginter is, I mean, it's not like Ginter was mistake free. I think you and I have had some comments that, and Dortmund Twitter certainly knows those kind of things, the mistakes of Ginter. So no, I don't really see that. Like I think it's it's probably the most exciting signing that Dortmund have made, I would say. And yeah, like I just even Akanji. I mean, I remember scouting Akanji in Switzerland, and yeah, I don't know how you feel about whether Akanji has sort of met expectations or exceeded them, but I think
I think he is a pretty good center back. You know, he obviously makes mistakes here and there, but I think overall in his development, it's positive. You know, and I hope Dortmund can get a good fee for him because he's fast, he can build up, he's aggressive, he can dribble forward, and he has a good physique to hold other players off. So I'm happy with how Akanji turned out. Let's say, obviously, he never made the final step to become a really consistent and world-class guy. But yeah, I think there were certainly periods when he wasn't hampered by injuries where he played at a really high level and was Dortmund's best center back easily.
Yeah, I would agree with that, right? Like, especially, I would say, you know, just by default of like, you know, what's happened to Hummels and you know, some of the other options there and how, you know, Kongracic's not working out and these kind of things. But yeah, I think like maybe Schlotterbeck's ceiling is just higher, right? Because, and then this is again like helped by being a left-footed center back who's 22, right? Like who can, you know, basically, you know, is in the Germany World Cup squad, and you know, some chance he will, you know, I mean, it's basically like him and Rudiger, maybe like all the guys, but yeah, it's there's not like that's what I meant is that it's such a unique position, right? Because you know so much of this playmaking now or building out of the back is left to center backs, and then he can also really defend well. So particularly in the air and in duels. So like it's yeah, like okay, you might worry a little bit about the personality. I think that's something where you would have concerns in terms of, you know, you could see this like this season where he's if you're sort of trying to spin it positively, he enjoys the spotlight, right? But I think the arrogance, which was I think brought up a few times by some people, can be perceived that way. It's kind of hard to gauge from the outside. I think it's part of the area of football that's unknowable, right?
Yeah.
Unless you're really there every day, like unless you're like, even if you're like a beat journalist, you probably get closer to this. But I think, you know, this has been the thing about Brandt and some of these other players, right? And some other ones who maybe again aren't going that extra couple of percentage points. I think like it isn't a concern with Schlotterbeck because he has over the last 2 years has gone those extra, you know. The concern is that maybe he gets into this kind of mindset, right? Like that he's made it at this bigger club, but you know.
Well, let's hope not. But then again, I mean, he's also only 22 years old. Let's not forget, like his personality will obviously develop a lot in the next years. And I think being in a different environment also does something to you instantly. Like, so I don't know. It's always a wild card. It happened before that players came to Dortmund and yeah felt like they made it and didn't feel like they needed to push even further. But for now I'm not really concerned. Because I think. I mean, Kiel said that he's very ambitious and that he wants to win stuff with Dortmund, and I feel like the reason why Dortmund are able to convince players like Süle or Schlotterbeck or even Adeyemi is that they are now really also talking about maybe a new era. I don't know, but certainly a transition, and it feels like Dortmund want to become a bit more serious again, because let's be honest, this season was a bit of a clown show and there are a lot of transfers, and I think the squad just needs to be cleaned up a little and redefined, and I think there's a narrative and a story to tell that might convince players, but also that you know, if you want to talk about new beginnings, you will obviously have to talk about how they fit into that picture, and I think Dortmund are planning with Schlotterbeck in a leadership role. You know, I've seen people on Twitter making bets who the next Dortmund captain will be after Royce, and whether it will be Süle, Schlotterbeck or Kobel. Right now, my money is on Kobel, but obviously it's always hard to say what a dynamic yeah, we would see. But I think Schlotterbeck will also be helped by having Kobel in goal, because I think he's a better fit for him as a goalkeeper, because Kobel can play off his line much better as well. So that might mitigate a little bit of the top speed deficit that Schlotterbeck may have. But yeah, maybe just lastly, we've talked about how he fits in general, but now obviously the big question is, or the standardized question is, back 4 versus back 5, and how do you think he will fit in either systems?
So I mean, I think in the back 4, he's obviously the left center back, I would say, and I think in that sense, it's Hummels is the one who's kind of sitting out, right? Like I think that, like I don't think it's
let's talk about this real quick, because I think if you have very quick opponents, I feel like there are certain games where it might make more sense to not play Hummels but to play Schlotterbeck, just because to have more pace there.
Yeah, right. And then I mean, I think like Rosa in the sort of bigger games has often gone with the back 3 at Gladbach. Like that used to be kind of the Zakaria game. So you could probably see, and Schlotterbeck actually plays a lot of the time as a central in the back 3, right? So they'll have like or something, but sometimes he'll play on the left as well. So I would imagine then you just play Hummels in the center, and then you play him on the left, and then Zula's on kind of the right. Like that would be. But I would actually think like I can't really think of like any back line where he isn't really a starter. Like I think he's just too good for that, right? Like because I think you need, particularly from the left side, you need his passing, his ball progression, and with Hummels, I mean, it's 1 year left, right? So I mean, it doesn't seem like he's a massive part of. I mean, I could see like Hummels kind of getting these kind of 1 year extensions if they're like really, really close, or like those kind of things. But
I mean, it depends a little bit on his relationship to Watzke, I think.
Right. Yeah, but you also have Dortmund, U19 second team. You have a lot of up and comer center back like Collins, or either Koulibaly or Kamara can stuff like. Yeah, at least like I would imagine they would get some minutes in terms of next season, like as being the 4th or 5th choice, like I guess depending on how you think about it, or maybe 5th choice behind Emre Can, which now I think that seems like a very reasonable thing. And and then Bensebaini, if that happens, you can also play him there in some. I mean, I wouldn't really play him in a 2, but in a back 3, you could play him as left center back in some games as well. So yeah, it's more than enough. But I think you sign these players, both Zula and Schlotterbeck, to build around, right? Like for the next the next cycle, right, which is contract cycle, so 4 or 5 years. And I want to kind of just say the point about that you mentioned before about Dortmund want to get serious, and I think like you shouldn't really underrate how Bayern could be going through this transition, right? Like that's with Lewandowski potentially. I mean, okay, they re-signed Neuer and Müller, right? But
but they're not getting younger.
It's gonna say like it might be like 1 more year, or maybe like till 2024 because of the Euros in Germany. But you think it could be Dortmund in 2 years, right? Or next year, if like things kind of go right for them, right? Like because when you're doing these kind of signings, you are thinking maybe not in the first year, but I don't know, it's plausible, right? And I would think it's a possibility next season, but then again, like we always do these things, and this is the greatest time for it. Like we've kind of gone early with May, because usually this happens in like July when everybody talks themselves into Dortmund as being the favorites. But
let's talk ourselves into Dortmund as being the favorite for 23-24.
Yeah, let's get on early, and then we can claim that corner. Yeah.
Yeah, no. So yeah, Erling Haaland to Man City just became official. I think it really is only in the 60 million range. No surprises there. Just wanted to mention it that it literally just broke during our recording. I wonder
It's
when.
nice of them to.
Yeah, I wonder when Adeyemi will be announced. But yeah, it's nice to finally have closure on that one, because Haaland obviously leaving Dortmund for Manchester City was, you know,
One of the worst kept secrets.
exactly. I mean, the fact that he was going to leave, be it Real Madrid or whatever club, I think that was pretty certain. And now it's just, I think it's a bit of a relief that you don't have to deal with these rumors a million years. So yeah, obviously. Dortmund recently have been linked with even Sebastian Aller, who would be my absolute favorite player. I don't know if this is financially feasible, because he's playing lights out at Ajax and they recently signed him for like 30 million. So I don't know if they can pull it off, but yeah, if that happens, would be perfect. Otherwise, I think 2 or 3 episodes I talked about.
Yeah, I guess so. The other thing is like he's Ten Hag's favorite, right? Because he was with him Utrecht, and
Yeah.
you just went to the richest club in the world, and they have 37, 38-year-olds Ronaldo and Cavani. So it's not like they cannot use a sort of
Yeah, I feel like Alea would be a good fit to any team, because he is such a versatile number 9 that I think he would fit in almost any system, to be honest. So yeah, my hopes are not very high. It's just like Bayern hopes to sign Mané probably should not be very high. But it's still nice to be linked to Alea. But I think it's probably going to be more like a Losek or so, who's going to be the new number 9. And then
yeah. I mean, like there was other ones like Kalajic was one who's mentioned, right? And then
yeah,
Ugo Etikite is the other one who
exactly.
I haven't followed too much. But Kozak has been a guy who's been talked up for like 3 years, as in the Czech league, and people who follow that space closely. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I still think like the most likely scenario is trying this kind of two striker formation, and then potentially Royce behind them, and yeah, and maybe just not, trying to, because I think that's been kind of I don't know how you feel about Malin's season, but yeah, it's been kind of it's hard to say like it's been super successful, although it's picked up a little bit, but you would also kind of think of him as like, I think in general it's just true for Dortmund, is that they were just such a like Haaland's shadow hanging over them kind of thing, right? And almost like, this happens a lot. It was, like almost the Ewing theory that in American sports culture, like there's this kind of expression by Bill Simmons who uses the Ewing theory, which is like when the best player or like the biggest name leaves, and then somehow like the team does better because you know you realize that there's been a lot of stuff behind the scenes necessarily that was and then certain players, and I would count like Malin there and some of the other ones who just like, okay, now we'll count it out, or maybe we're like and then they would explode, or they would have that second season or one. So
I
I'm
mean,
not saying
I would not be surprised if Marlon plays much better in the second year than in the first year. It happened so many times, especially in a striker position for Dortmund. So yeah, I'm far from writing him off. I think he had really big struggles early on, especially also like when it comes to pressing, team cohesion, and stuff like that. Just call it the hustle or whatever you want to call it, but he was lacking severely in that department. But he managed to clean it up, and going forward, obviously he's not an out and out number 9 in my book. I think he's a player that also needs a lot of space to operate. But at the same time, Dortmund don't have a lot of players that can win 1v1 duels, and he's certainly a guy who can do that. So if he becomes more of a winger, I would not be surprised. But when you talk about the diamond formation, and it's a 4-4-2 diamond, I guess, then maybe he is in that tandem striker do somewhere. I don't know. But yeah, I'm really hoping that he has a big season because Dortmund spent a lot of money for him, and I don't think they will have the resources to also replace him because I have a hunch that both Hazard and Brandt are going out the door. So Malen will be much more relied on. Let's put it this way next year.
Yeah, I think it's probably right. That's how I was. Certainly I don't I don't really see Hazard just like as far as how he a couple times like was in the squad, right? And then, Brandt recently, I mean, actually, interesting, like almost like the contract. He's not in the contract here, but almost like those kind of he put up enough numbers, and then like to maybe like have somebody kind of say, oh well, it's almost a little bit like Julian Draxler, kind of thing. You succumb to his charms, right? Like, and yeah, it's probably also like maybe a time for change of scenery for him, and he's been there maybe a little too long and hasn't actually had the success or the impact that he would have, or I think we all would have liked him to have. And then you kind of, you have Bellingham, you have Dahoud, right, in the midfield, and then you Reina if he comes back, right, you still got, and then you can play the twice, you can play that sort of almost 4-3-3, like. So yeah, it's there. And I think Adeyemi just gives it the other dimension. But
yeah, what do you think of the Adeyemi transfer? I know you haven't really closely watched him, neither have I. But from what you've seen, what you can glean,
I have watched him. I would say the last year or so, and I mean, he's got this interesting background, right, of being from the Munich area and like having some sort of disciplinary problems and not making it at Bayern, and kind of finding himself. And I mean, from what I know, there are kind of some kind of issues with him as far as outside of the football thing. But he has, I mean, just in terms of like that speed, right? And then I watched actually a lot of Salzburg because they were in the Champions League and we covered the Champions League. So particularly, I think for the Bayern match, I ended up watching back a few of their games. I mean, yeah, it's the thing with him is that the worry that you kind of have with a lot of our base strikers is how do they kind of function outside of it. But I think like all of them have kind of whether it's like Patson Daka, whether it's Haaland, right? Like so, I think he's probably the least polished out of those guys. I would say in terms of being in a possessional, somewhat of a slow press. But if I kind of suspect that Dortmund are going more towards that style, then that's again mitigated, right? And then if he is used in like the almost like the Timo Werner profile, right, or those kind of ways, then yeah.
Yeah,
Like
do you think that Dortmund will play him as a striker or more as a midfielder?
Adeyemi?
Yeah.
No, I definitely see him as a striker. I think that's the only. I mean, I don't really, that's the only thing I would.
Okay, because me looking at his profile always, I have him more as like the Sancho replacement in my mind than being a striker because
As like a wide, yeah. I
well,
mean,
because he's very good in the one we won. Well, I don't know, like he could be better in that department. Like he's not exactly Sancho like, but at least he has some nice passes from the half spaces into the box. To me, he's more of a facilitator than he's a finisher. I'm not too impressed with his finishing skills, to be honest. But maybe once summer preseason starts and the first friendlies, maybe I see a different player that I've seen now.
no, it's. I mean, I think like one of the like really really good examples is like the first Salzburg match against Bayern where they had really have these ideas of drawing out and of Bayern's like less defense and just basically, for example, like he manipulated Lucas Hernandez so well that he would come so deep, and I think Okafor did this as well, but he would come so deep and basically it would be a pass to, and he would be the third man run, so it would be like either Salzburg win it and then they play one pass to a striker and then lay off, and then Adeyemi is the one who makes the run behind. Like I think that's something that Dortmund can certainly utilize. I mean, obviously it was always easy with Haaland, but I mean, even I think in the Favre years, there were examples of this. You don't necessarily have the personnel because it was hard to do it with Paco Alcacer.
Not the fastest.
Yeah, and even Royce to some extent, but I think he'll give them a different dimension. Yeah, I mean, I would agree that he's not like the otherworldly, like Haaland type of finisher where you can count on him. And yeah, you probably worry more about him in terms of the quality of the league adjustment, right? But again, like I think in that sense, the track record of like a Patson Daka or some of the guys who were there, like in some ways, it's very very hard to go wrong with away players, whether they come out of Austria or whether they come out of Leipzig, and so I would it helps that Dortmund have a coaching staff which are really really familiar. So I think like all of those kind of things are very like I think it's again like in that sense the Schlotterbeck similarity is that if you have one, and Schlotterbeck has more than one quality, is that you one sort of world class quality or two, then I think in some ways having those kind of specialists is almost better than having someone who's like very very good at a number of things or good at a number of things or decent at a number of things, but that isn't necessarily outstanding, and that
What do you think that Adeyemi is world class at? Is it the pace?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's what I would think, and that's like that's I mean, I would think that again. I don't follow the Bundesliga this season all that closely, where I'm not watching 6 or 7 games anymore every weekend, but I do watch a couple, and then obviously have access to games and watch them back. And like my kind of take is that there are just so many teams who just have the pace or like pace out wide, and it's whether it's the Bochums or the Unions or in some ways Freiburg as well, and that gets you really really far. So it's such it's or even, I mean Leverkusen probably the best example even. So it isn't like I think that's not a, and you see this I think absolutely at the highest level. So there I think that's that's not something you can coach obviously, right? And then your hope is that you can add some of those other things. So yeah, that's what I would say.
All right. Yeah. Sounds promising. I'm really intrigued about the Adeyemi transfer, but I've said before, like I'm not fully convinced about that, even especially since Dortmund I think are shelling out 38 million or so. That's a lot of money, and it's really hard to, if let's say it doesn't work out, it's really hard to cut your losses on that one, and and if it does work out so well that you have to resell him, then my question obviously is, will Dortmund actually make much of a profit? But yeah, that's pretty much it for today.
That's something you could say about Haaland, right? Like
yeah. But that's different because Haaland has a release clause, and I think Dortmund are fighting very hard that Adeyemi does not have a release clause. So there's that. Yeah, I think with Haaland, it was always clear that Dortmund, I mean, it's since Mario Götze, I think Dortmund have not really given any player a release clause. So allowing Haaland to have one just says so much about the exceptional talent he is, and how Dortmund were from the beginning very clear that they will try to have him for 2 years, and that's pretty much it. And I mean, it worked out for the most part. Obviously, injuries were a bit annoying in the Haaland phase, but he had some really fantastic games, and he scored a ton of goals, and it was fun while it lasted. And I think that was sort of the emotional relationship all Dortmund fans had. And now I think everyone is just relieved that it's over and that you don't have to deal with the million rumors anymore. And there's that. So on that note, Abel, if you have to plug anything, be my guest.
No, just Twitter. I mean, BundesPL, I still put some stuff out there from time to time, and some other things I do are not really all that public. So
yeah. Well, either way, it was great to have you on the show. Thank you very much for your insight, and we shall be back with another episode either later this week to have more of a review and preview of the Fürth and Hertha game, but I can't promise it. So either way, as always, thank you for listening, and thank you to our patrons for the support. Goodbye.